Okay, hello great souls. Welcome to our Living Yoga Satsang, reflections on Autobiography of a Yogi. Let's take a moment to center ourselves with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of Kriya Yoga, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and Paramhansa Yogananda ji. Saints of all religions, friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Come to us as we sit today and study these great teachings. Help us to receive the blessings within these pages. Awaken us to our own highest soul nature. Help us to live in this divine consciousness. Help us to realize the truth of our inner freedom and to share this divine light, this divine freedom with all. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, so this week we're looking at chapter 26, and this is, the title of this chapter is The Science of Kriya Yoga. And it is very deep. It's very deep. As I was reading through and reflecting on the many things that Yogananda talks about in terms of Kriya, there's so many pieces. There's so many pieces to highlight and talk about. So I'm gonna go through. Whoops, there goes my paper. Excuse me. I'm just going to go through and see what comes out for us. So the very first thing that Yogananda talks about with Kriya Yoga is that Kriya Yoga was reintroduced. So earlier in studying the autobiography, we talked about the cycles of time of the Yugas. So this is a yogic teaching that time goes cyclically through levels of awakening, rising consciousness, and descent. There's a rising and descending consciousness that is reflected in cycles of time. And as in manifestation, there are these cycles of time that we move through, and we just keep moving through them. And what Yogananda said about each soul that comes into a particular cycle of time, it fits what we need. So there's something about that particular cycle of time that's beneficial for our soul evolution. Asha has said that, there were times when she teasingly said to Swami Kriyananda, could we come at a higher time next time? Well, so what we're in right now is called Dwapara Yuga. This is the age of energy, and it is ascending. So, that there's some good things about that, some very, very good things about this time that we're in. The preceding time was Kali Yuga, and that was the Dark Ages. And so as we go around, I think I'll do it this way because I'm opposite if you're looking at the camera. I'm speaking to the camera. So, we're ascending and then we're descending. And on either side, the same cycle of time matches. So Kali Yuga is at the base, and that's the darkest time. And what's meant by that is that the consciousness is very heavy and very dense and really can only understand reality in a very materialistic sense. So the concept that we have in Dwapara Yuga, that all life is energy and that all physical manifestation is a representation of pure energy. I will say for myself, it's hard to grasp the truth of it, but I believe it. In Dwapara Yuga, we have the capacity, the consciousness to receive these teachings, right? This understanding in a way that in Kali Yuga was very, very difficult to do. Now, interestingly, Jesus came in the time of Kali Yuga. So his teachings, which are the highest teachings, were very difficult for people to understand in that age. And it may have been, one of the reasons that they crucified him, is they could not. He was so revolutionary in his teaching, in his presence, in his power. He walked and moved and emanated with a power that no one could compete with. You can't compete with that power. Divine power is the greatest power. So there is no way to be greater than that. And he was teaching soul freedom. He was. That's what he was teaching. He came at that time. There was a karmic reason, I would say, from yoga teaching perspective, for him to come at that time. So I'm chuckling now because I saw this little cartoon. This was a while ago. It was very humorous. And in the cartoon, you had Jesus, Moses, and Buddha. And they were talking about the state of the world. And all three of them agreeing, the world is having some real troubles, right? Like, we should do something. Something needs to be done. So the three of them are conferring about this. And Jesus said, well, I don't think I should go. We all know what happened the last time I went. And it was just so, it was humorous, very funny. And it just was sweet to look at it in that way. But, the thing that Asha tells wonderful, she's really one of our best teachers about the life of Christ. In fact, she has a whole series that you may still be able to access. The series itself is completed, but it's all recorded. So I think you might still be able to purchase it and watch it. And she gave this beautiful dialogue and conversations about the life of Christ, primarily focusing on Israel. So there was an Israel pilgrimage, and she did this. She led a few of them. And so then took students through the experience with pictures and song and passages from the Bible, all on Yogananda's teachings about Christ, the life of Christ. And this was one of his missions, to come and show that what he called original Christianity and original Hinduism or yoga. So the original yoga, original Christianity, how these two paths are the same path and the same teaching. And in this chapter of Kriya Yoga, he names Jesus as being someone who practiced Kriya Yoga or a similar technique, is what he said. And the essence of Kriya Yoga that Yogananda talks about here is a level of mastery of ourself. It's a mastery of our energy, a mastery of our consciousness. It's a technique that leads to liberation, that brings us very quickly to soul liberation. Now, when I say that, I'm also thinking of Asha telling a story that when she heard Yogananda, one of his famous quotes is that we carry, each one of us, within us, a portable paradise, right? Our soul nature. So the spiritual awakening, the path of self-realization, is not some outer destination. It's an inner discovery of who we are, and it's a full awakening to our own soul nature. So Asha said when she heard that we each of us carry this inner abode, this inner oasis, she thought, great, she figured take about 5 years. And she's been on the path very strongly dedicated for over 50 years. And she's not yet claimed that she lives in that inner abode of peace and light all the time. I certainly, in the years that I have known her, she just becomes ever more shining in my experience. And a phenomenal, amazingly gifted teacher in the sense that for me as a student, I know I'm not alone in this, it's a pure channel of divine energy and Swami Kriyananda and Master's energy. She has a gift for sharing the teachings. So she gave a beautiful series on the life of Christ. And what Yogananda said is that Jesus, he said this not just about Jesus, but he said any spiritual path, which is also a teaching of Patanjali. He mentions Patanjali in this chapter, and I've spoken of Patanjali before. So Patanjali, great sage, I believe he was considered to be self-realized. It would certainly make sense given what he shared with the world. That no one knows what time he lived, which is interesting. Ancient is what it's called. We just say, well, ancient times. Patanjali put forth, he's considered to be the, sometimes called the father of yoga, but the idea here is that he brought together the core principles of yoga, the path of spiritual awakening, and identified what's called Ashtanga yoga, which is the 8-limbed path of self-realization that all true spiritual paths embody. The teachings might be different. So, you might, I know this from experience in the Christian world, with a Christian background, is that you can have two churches both following Jesus, but say very different things. So the idea is that at the essence, the teachings are the same. And what Patanjali said is that anyone who realizes, has an experience of spiritual awakening will have passed through these stages. It will happen. And so he goes and defines them. The yamas and the niyamas are these moral precepts of how we behave, how we conduct ourselves. They're not given to us. Patanjali does not offer them from an authoritative shaking of the finger. You must be nonviolent and truthful. It's not about that. What it is that our soul nature would live this way naturally, and we've gotten off course. So by practicing the yamas and the niyamas, we bring our consciousness into alignment of who we are. Because if, again, I was living in a place of full awareness of my soul nature, I would always be truthful. We talked about this in the last chapter, where Yogananda declares, because I have always spoken truth, I speak this truth to his sister, and his sister was healed. And that is the power of truthfulness. Patanjali identifies with each practice of the yama or niyam comes a specific spiritual power. And it is the power of our soul, the power of God within us. And as we awaken spiritually, we have more access to that power. It becomes something that we are able to call upon and utilize and, share appropriately. So what masters, when they're sharing divine power, they're always guided by God's will. One of the things that Yogananda said about the spiritual powers is, there's a downside to them. So in Ananda Yoga in particular, based on Yogananda's teachings, we're not seeking spiritual power for itself. It's what he called spiritual phenomenon. That he said the path to God is not a circus. So although these powers come to us, we don't want to be trying to, that's not the point. The point of them is not that, because the true point is to realize our oneness with the divine, right? And the further along we go in the journey of awakening, the more unimportant those particular powers are. It's just, in this moment I'll say a side note. It is the teachings. When I've been in particular classes on Patanjali, there are these moments where the teachers that I respect so much within Ananda have talked about this very thing. And, it's important to share the teachings and to say, well, here are the teachings. And at the same time say, we practice these things not for spiritual powers, but so that we can live in the joy in the bliss of our divine nature. That is truly the greatest power. And when we're in that consciousness, as I said, we won't, the other things, they just seem unimportant. And we recognize that we want to be calling upon divine guidance for how we utilize any power that is cultivated through yoga practice. So that's just something I'll say about that. In Kriya Yoga, so Yogananda talks about the technique a little bit, and he begins by saying that he can't be very specific. And the reason that he can't be very specific is there is a sacred contract, a sacred understanding about spiritual practices and teachings like Kriya Yoga, that you give these tools and these techniques, you share them sensitively, right? They're not for to just share with anyone. So I'll use an example of this with pranayama. And actually Kriya Yoga is a pranayama. So prana, life force, life energy, yam, like in the yamas and niyamas, yam is control. So we control the life force. It's a technique for that. And through that practice of technique, self-mastery. So in general practice of yoga, there is pranayama, and it's actually one of the stages in Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, which we learn how to work with the flow of energy and control that flow of energy. And a way to do that, one of the ways to do that, is with breathing techniques, and they're often referred to as pranayams. Pranayama, the principle, is much larger than a breathing technique. It's a way of being, a way of moving through the world. All of yoga is actually a practice of pranayama. When we're working with likes and dislikes, that is working with pranayama, because I like it, I have energy, right? I don't have to work for that energy. If I like something, there will be more energy around the things that I like. If I don't like something, less energy. Pranayama, working with likes and dislikes, is being able to awaken a flow of energy, whether I like it or not. That's great power to have that, to say, I choose. I choose. I choose to give, I choose to draw energy in and apply that energy, even if I'd rather not do what I'm doing personally. I don't really like it that much. But on a higher level, I recognize the value of it. So I want to do it, and I want to do it with great energy. Well, that's a practice. That's a yoga practice. It comes up often in life and comes up often in yoga practice. It might be seva. It might be work. It might be an interpersonal relationship where it's a challenge, but on a deep level, you feel it's the right challenge. And so being able to meet that challenge with energy is a yoga practice. It's a pranayama. So what Yogananda says about Kriya and this sacred practice, this contract of reveal things, reveal teachings, reveal techniques to those who are ready to receive them, and only to those who are ready to receive them, because it can actually damage people spiritually. Let's just say first and foremost, it can damage them to reveal a technique that they're not ready to receive. So with pranayama, the reason I was mentioning that is a yoga teacher, yoga and meditation teacher. So part of, we go through the training, we learn the different practices, we learn how to share them, and we are taught with, I would say, a lot of firmness, right? To be careful in the teaching of these practices. You know, learn how to share them in a way that people can work with the technique and ready their physical body, their physiology for the technique. What's tricky about it with a pranayama, even yoga practice, it doesn't look like a lot's going on. You don't look like you're doing much. You're breathing. Okay, I'm controlling my breathing. I'm breathing to this count. I'm holding. I'm exhaling. Now I'm doing this. There are various things. In general, kind of in a general way, they seem nice. They seem pleasant enough. They don't seem like a lot. And they are working on a very subtle level of life force within us and consciousness within us. The yoga postures as well. The yoga postures, you know, if you can do them, and I think those who do them easily in their body just can enjoy how good they feel. They generally feel good. And if you know how to do them in a way that works with your body, they generally feel good. You feel better afterward. That is a level of truth and experience of the practice. But it's only the beginning level of truth and experience of the practice. Those postures change our consciousness. They awaken us. They awaken us to a higher reality of truth, especially if we practice them in the way that, which I know is Ananda Yoga, so that's the path, that's the practice of yoga I can speak to. But those postures themselves are powerful. So any practice of those postures have value and benefit, physiological benefit, right? Strengthening benefit. What I've heard from others who practice other styles of yoga is that, and in the West, this is particularly true, a lot of focus is on the body. Well, they are good for the body. So I stand in a place of, I think yoga's great. And however you practice it and however it works for you, there are benefits as long as you practice it safely. And that is the point, practice it safely. It's not always practiced safely. So people get injured sometimes, and that's unfortunate. With pranayama, so the pranayama, the subtle practice of working with energy, you can awaken energy in an unbalanced way. You can awaken too much life force and energy for your own physical body, and it can wreak havoc on your life. It can create instability mentally and emotionally and physically. And I have had students share with me that experience. Now, when I was in training, my trainers shared that. It's not an everyday common practice, so it's nothing to be afraid of. We don't want to be afraid of pranayama. It's really about being respectful of the power of the teachings and the power of the tools. They are powerful beyond what you can imagine, how powerful they are. I've seen that in my own life. It's very, very subtle. It's just incredibly incremental that the change happens. And it does happen, though. It does. And so with Kriya Yoga, one of the things that Yogananda is talking about when he says, I will share in general with you the power of Kriya Yoga. I will tell you that this is a technique for liberation. And this technique is one that will propel you. He called it the airplane route to God. So what he says it here, he says it in other places as well, that our own soul is evolving and will evolve whether we intentionally help the soul evolve or not. It is happening. So part of incarnating and coming here, we are on a path of awakening. So this is a yoga teaching that everyone's on a spiritual path because we're all divine souls. Yogananda described the soul and ego in this way. He said the ego is the aspect of ourself that has forgotten who we are. So the ego thinks I'm a body, right? It relates to the material realm. It's really, in many ways, Kali Yuga consciousness, the ego. It just really, everything is on a particular tangible level, and it looks for security in material security. It looks for feeling good by things going well. So what Yogananda says about the ego and the journey of soul awakening is that it's an evolution of realizing the ego discovers and remembers. It's called smriti, which is divine memory. It remembers, we remember who we are. And this happens over time by touching into our soul nature, by practicing things that we encounter a higher reality. And when we encounter that higher reality, there's a part of us that recognizes it as natural. It doesn't feel unnatural. It feels like an understanding, a resonance, right? So there's a joy or a peace or a freedom that in some ways might feel new, like, wow, I feel more joyful than I ever have, or more peaceful, or more at ease. But there's another way in which, as we stay with it, we recognize a certain rightness of it all, right? It's not foreign to us. So it wouldn't be. Our soul nature is not foreign to us. So this is the divine Leela, the divine play that our ego, we've forgotten who we are, and there's a journey of awakening that will happen automatically. We will learn from life. It might take us a lot of incarnations to learn from life, but we will learn from life. We will learn the yamas and niyamas. No one has to show them to us to say, you know, if you behave this way, you'll be happier. Right? We discover that eventually. We do. And that's a yoga teaching as well, that anything we automatically don't do as part of yamas and niyamas that we know, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. So we've learned it, that's why. That's where we're willing, we get it pretty quickly. So the difference with Kriya Yoga and the natural evolution is that what's required for the soul to awaken naturally without the technique of Kriya is very slow. It takes perfect practice of health, perfect practice of the yamas and niyamas. It's living in a particular way that many of us know, but that would be the right way to live. If I exercised in a particular way, or ate in a particular way, or behaved with others in a particular way, it's like our best behavior. So if we do our best behavior, now I know he talks about it in here, and I've heard it in other places. So I'm just going to take a stab at it in this moment. It might be a million years. I mean, I can't even believe it. I can't get my head around that. It could be. I don't know. It's a very long time. It's a very long time. Maybe it's 100 years. Maybe if you could do it perfectly, it takes 100 years. I'm not sure. But I do know that his point is that Kriya is very quick in terms of how it awakens us. Now, that being said, I mentioned Asha's story because you can be a Kriya yogi and say, okay, maybe I've done this for 40 years. I'm not a master yet. That might be true. I mean, that's been my experience of many people, my own self included, but the rate at which the consciousness is becoming refined and the heart purified and living in a higher and higher level of receptivity to God, receptivity to joy. I mean, it's in one sense, it can seem slow because, as Asha thought in 5 years, she'd live in the perfect peace of inner abode. And 50 some years later, she's not always there. I'm certain she's there I know she's talked about this, much more than she used to be, right? Probably light years ahead of where she used to be. I've just got to believe, I'm sure that feels true to me. It's certainly true in my own life. I can just stay with my own journey, my own story. There's no question. And the other thing I want to say about Kriya, I'll continue this chapter next week because there's much more to say here, is, you know, again, Yogananda said that Jesus practiced it. He talked about other saints. St. Paul, he said, was practicing a form of Kriya Yoga. Mentioning Patanjali, there's a pathway of awakening. It's not limited to Kriya. So Kriya, I'm here sharing the teachings of yoga, and we're reflecting on Autobiography of a Yogi, so it's appropriate that I talk about this particular technique, and it is a powerful one. That being said, it's not the only way to awaken. It's not the only way to realize our soul nature, our highest self. There are other spiritual paths and other spiritual practices that will get you there. And if that's yours, and you know, I just want to honor that Yogananda did not come to diminish any truthful path to God. What he came to share is a particular way to get there. And for those who resonate with that or feel drawn to that, it's here. It's here for you. So I think that's as much time as I have. I have a couple minutes, so let me see if there's anything else to say. Okay, I'll say this part about actually, I feel like let's end it right there. There's more I can say. I'll say more next time. I feel like this is enough for us today. So I'm grateful to have you here, and just wishing you many blessings on your journey today and always. Thank you, great souls.